let's step along to ventilation resiliency. And looking for my colleague, Amandeep Dayal, the Greening Healthcare Technical Director from NLF Consulting, to help us with the story around this, and in particular the work that Alberta Health Service is doing. So Greening Healthcare has always been focused on ventilation systems as being the biggest single energy user in hospitals, bigger than medical equipment, bigger than lighting, and impacting all the components of energy. So base electricity in the form of fan power, cooling electricity with air conditioning that's delivered through the air handling systems, base thermal, predominantly reheat and heating thermal, which is preheating the amount of outside air that goes into air handling. So it's the dominant energy user in the large majority of hospitals, and so merits everybody's attention. If you're just starting down this path, it's the place to begin. Ventilation resiliency, we adopted that term coming around this potentially competing requirement for more outside air to respond to the pandemic. But we still need to take care of the climate crisis, because that's not gone away anywhere. So what are the optimal carbon solutions for managing air handling systems that assure high quality indoor environments, safe environments for patients and staff, at the least utility costs and the least greenhouse gas emissions? And we also categorized or classified resilient systems as being adaptable over time. I think Dr. Ballon this morning in her keynote addressed the fact we ain't seen the last of this yet. There's COVID-19, there'll be something else 21. So having ventilation systems that are readily adaptable, that you can monitor, that you have under control, readily adaptable to new requirements over time is important. And again, we're really happy to have ASHRAE as part of this conversation this afternoon to bring us their latest thoughts. Amandeep and his little team have done a nice way. We like to compartmentalize ideas so that we can kind of keep our heads around them. But the 5 steps towards ventilation resiliency, the starting point is always testing, and Amandeep will share the work that Alberta Health is doing around central system testing. And it still amazes us that so few hospitals have current information on what the central systems are doing, the overall supply air, the overall return air, the overall exhaust air. Is the whole place in balance? Is it even close to where it should be? Life begins with testing. Controls and monitoring is a really big deal. So the building automation system, the control strategies, supply air temperature resets, all of those things matter, Retrofits, we know about variable frequency drives, reducting, zone dampers, design standards and metrics. So when we're building new construction, when we're doing major renovations, what are the metrics you give to your design team to ensure that at least the new space that's coming on stream is where it should be? And finally, the 5th step is maintenance standards, the damage that a leaking control valve or a malfunctioning damper can do, and documentation to make sure that you've got ready access to information. So these are the 5 steps that we see as being central to being able to make the statement to management and to staff that we have resilient ventilation systems here. We're good to go. Case study this afternoon is to talk about Medicine Hat Regional Hospital, and we're going to run through this fairly quickly because we want to leave time for a panel discussion with Jared, who's actually responsible for running this place, and with executive level from Alberta Health Services, and with ASHRAE to talk about how some of these 5 steps apply to what's happening at Medicine Hat. Here's a simple profile of the hospital. So it's a substantial facility. It's getting up towards 1 million square feet, 300 beds, and it's a full service acute care hospital. It's got all the things that many of the hospitals online today would be looking at. Through Greening Healthcare, we track its energy savings trend. If you're not familiar with the online system, you find online, all the hospitals can access their data online at any point. But the blue dots are the current monthly bill. The red dots are the weather normalized baseline consumption. And Medicine Hat's been having great success bringing the blue line on electricity well below the red line, and you can see improving performance over time. But interestingly, given the things that they've been doing, and I'll pass this over to Amandeep in a moment, and then we'll pick up with Jared during the panel discussion. Interestingly, thermal energy hasn't been following suit, even though some of the changes have been made to the air handling systems. So that's the facility. This is how its performance has been trending over time in terms of electricity and gas consumption. The initiatives, Amandeep, give us a sense of the measures, and I think you've highlighted the ones that you think have had the biggest impact both on electricity use, and you've got some theories about why the gas use is not coming down as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And yeah, as you could see, I mean, I don't want to steal thunder from Jared's conversation because he's going to address a lot of these measures they have implemented in the facility. Just highlighted key of these measures that have so far driven the electricity savings. The recommissioning program is one of them, where they have involved their in-house staff. The biggest factor in sort of achieving those savings is coming from the scheduling of these air handling units, where they installed multiple VFDs on these systems and scheduled those 24/7 areas where they were previously running at 24/7 but not occupied during the off hours. And also they implemented 3 big LED lighting projects where they retrofitted the T8s and T12s into LED lamp replacements in their facilities. So this is a sort of a comprehensive list where they implemented other measures, and some of them were very successful, some of them were not. But the idea is that within their facility, they kept a running list of the measures they implemented, and also tracked the savings against which measures resulted in those savings and which measures didn't, so they can kind of compare those analysis afterwards as well.
So what's striking about this that we'll pick up with Jared in a moment is the amount of activity, the amount of effort that they've been putting in. Most of you would have heard from Steve Reese this morning from Alberta Health about how they created a culture of active engagement in energy efficiency throughout the organization, and hearing firsthand from Jared in the front line making those things happen. But this is the kind of activity that's been happening within Medicine Hat and within other facilities. We talked previously about target savings, so you can see here the 29 consumptions. Again, here in equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot, and you multiply by 3.4 to get to kBTUs per square foot. But some savings potential in electricity. But the biggest opportunity now is within thermal energy use, and with most of that on the heating thermal side. And I think both Jared and Amandeep are talking about making better use, in particular, both of the test results and the controls of the thermal heat recovery wheels as contributing towards that $145,000 a year savings potential on the heating thermal piece. So this is illustrative of how the targets can direct you to the energy components with the savings opportunity, and by extension to the building systems, the energy systems attached to those.
Ian, just quickly on one thought on the last one. I think this is probably the most important. I think one of the things I would say as a recommendation is for all the facility managers and directors on the line, like each facility should have this sort of profile with them, so they can readily know on an annual basis what are the key areas that they need to focus on each of those elements, whether it's base electric cooling or any of those components. But having this metrics as a sort of a handy for them to compare against on an annual basis is sort of a must in these days, as I always suggest to most of those facility directors and managers out there.
So pick out the highlights for us. These are some of the things that you're working on, or that the hospital is working on, and that have been found so far. What do we have here?
Yeah. So system testing for air handling units and adjustments has been a key component in success for Medicine Hat, and they're still working through it. What it has uncovered over the years, and also this is just a typical example of one air handling unit system, when you could see when in this case the supply air fan was supposed to bring in outside air through the outside air damper. But what's happening with this is that you can see the supplier is actually bringing in outside air through the exhaust relief damper, which is around 4,200 CFM. The primary reason for that was, if you look at below on the return fan circle, 27,000 CFM, it was at 92% VFD speed. It was expected to deliver 37,000 CFM, but it's delivering 27,000 CFM, which is like 10,000 CFM less than what it was supposed to do. So what's happening with that is the supplier is actually making up their air through the exhaust relief air. So that imbalance, what it caused two things. One is that you're bringing in more outside air than is required because your return fan is underperforming. And secondly, it's bringing in outside air through the relief duct, which is not how it's supposed to work. In addition to that, what air testing uncovered is you have additional outside air damper pressure drop and also additional pressure drop on the cooling and heating coil. So these are the factors that you get uncovered. These get uncovered during the air testing report, which generally get missed if you don't have these comprehensive air testing done on these systems.
And those factors are affecting fan power here?
Yes, definitely. Those factors
and
affecting
thermal energy there.
Yes. So this, again, building pressurization, especially with healthcare facilities, really an important topic due to CSA as well as maintaining their pressurization within their department is a key to health and safety of the occupants. So when medicine had conducted this comprehensive air testing, they find out that their buildings, as you can see at the bottom where it's summarized for all of these three buildings, the ACC building was negative. It was net airflow was negative at 25,000 liters per second compared to two other buildings. And because of that imbalance, that some of the systems on AB building has to be overpressurizing to make up for that 25,000 net negative. So this whole issue around building pressurization could only be uncovered or quantified if you have air testing done both at the system and the individual level. So having air testing kind of is a key to maintaining both, not just overall energy efficiency within the building, so that you don't get penalized for bringing more outside air into the building, but also making sure you get the right pressurization within the department so the health and safety of the occupants is not compromised. Enthalpy wheel control is another one that we've seen or in a lot of the other hospitals, but especially at Medicine Hat, this was uncovered where because of the programming language in the controls, the frost control preheat set point was set at -4, whereas the recommended set point was at -10. So what it did was it was not letting the enthalpy wheel run the more operational hours during the colder period, and especially this has a huge impact on the energy in the colder climate, where you could maximize most of heat wheels operation in the colder weather by setting your preheat temperatures higher than traditionally what we have seen. A lot of the facilities have set those at really high values, which is limiting the operations of the heat wheel. So this is a measure that, as Ian mentioned, is going to contribute to those gas savings in coming year. That's when it's going to get implemented for this next heating season. Ventilation scheduling, we talked about. This is, again, an exercise that was done by the facility you can actually see the handwritten notes. This is how it started, where Jared and his team actually went in and had meetings with the clinical staff around each of those departments to talk about what are the right schedules for each of those departments. They documented those schedules. Then they went into their BAS contractor and asked them to reprogramming those spaces based on the actual clinical hours. So there was a lot of back and forth within the conversation within the clinical staff and also the BAS programming. But This is sort of the effort you're looking at when you're implementing these schedules, and Jared's going to give more testimony to this, what are the challenges they faced when they implemented. But this is where the majority of the savings on electricity came from, is through this ventilation scheduling on these spaces which are not occupied during the unoccupied hours.
And as we referred to earlier, that the scheduling, zone scheduling and system scheduling is the biggest difference between the P3 hospitals that we looked at previously, the top of the charts, and the ones that are struggling to achieve high levels of efficiency. So last thought, Amandeep, before we get to the panel.
Yeah, so again, outside air control is another factor. So it's basically proportional to how much heating you will be doing in the heating season. The more outside you bring into the building, the more heating energy you're going to use. So in this case, this air handling system, where the recommended CSA requirements were at 33% outside air, this system was bringing in, the blue line you could see was bringing in at the coldest period around 42% outside air, and it's increasing as the weather gets milder. So what basically this is penalizing is your amount of heating you have to do to condition this space. So the recommendation in this case is to bring that outside air to the recommended level of CSA, so you can reduce your gas consumption in the building.
So when we bring Medicine Hat back a year from now as a case study, we are expecting to see substantial thermal energy savings, natural gas savings to go with the electrical savings. And from what I see in this, it's all to do with controls, testing, airflow adjustments, resetting return fan speeds, finding out where the static pressure losses are, fixing them, and just getting the systems running properly. And that's where the big numbers will come from. Does that sound right?
That is true. That is true. That is how it's been positioned.
So let's step along to our panel. And again, thanks to Franz. If you were on the call this morning, which most of you were, the Franz works with the Office of Sustainability at Alberta Health, and credit to Alberta Health that they have an Office of Sustainability. It's a vital part of their whole organizational and management system. Jared, just so happy you were able to join us here with all the stuff you got going as the technical lead actually on site making things happen. And David from Chicago, just really grateful that you could take time out from your busy day to bring an ASHRAE perspective to this and the whole picture about how are we balancing the demands of, again, sometimes competing demands of COVID and the climate crisis. But I really want to start with you, Jared, around not so much technically what's going on here, but this stuff is quite thoughtful. And you've got a major facility there to run. How do you find time for this? How much is your operations team engaged in this work? What kind of help do you get from friends? Like, how does that work? How are you able to pull this off when you got a real live big hospital working there through a pandemic? What does your life look like?
It's pretty hectic as always, but operationally you got to keep the building running and the occupants happy first. But I think it's always good to focus on sustainability. I mean, we start looking at budgeting and things like that. If we can save some dollars on the back end, that would obviously go into our sites too at some point. So relationship with the office sustainability is always nice. They've got certain expertise that we maybe don't have operationally on site that can help us with data capture and things like that. So it's definitely super helpful.
Okay, and what are your big goals from that long list? Because you provided that long list of all the stuff you guys are doing. What are your big goals around that? What are you most excited about over the coming, say, 12 months?
Yeah, so I mean, we're we have so many different project groups, we'll say, and different people working in different areas, right? From our maintenance to our project management to energy projects that are funded just specifically for that, and then other just upgrade projects that are going on. So, we may upgrade the chiller because it's at end of life, and we can get some efficiencies out of the new chiller, or a different design or something along those lines. So over the next year, like, I guess essentially the scheduling that we had talked about there was mainly in our newer building there, that it was kind of a quick win because it already had digital controls, and it was more or less like fine tuning the areas of occupancy in those spaces. Now that we, like we had said, we're putting VFD drives on the older buildings, like we've got a 1987 build and actually a 1955 build even that has been retrofitted so many times, it's crazy. So trying to find those efficiencies in those older systems is really where I think a lot of our bigger potential is going to come from. You know, with the buildings being so old, they've got passing valves, and, you know, the architectural design is not there to, you know, be the most efficient it could be. But I think once we get moving through these, we've come across some issues that, because the controls are all pneumatic, you know, in the room level, passing controls there or not, you can't override them, you can't, you know, you have to compensate for them in certain ways. So we found, I think, some newer strategies, for example, scheduling it at the air handler level, but not completely shutting off the airflow to the space, keeping some airflow going so that it, you know, doesn't completely overheat the space over the weekend or something like that when the area is unoccupied. So it's kind of what I'm looking forward to. And then, like I said, working with Deep, we're finding all these little inefficiencies that you just wouldn't see walking up to the air handler, you know, or even, you know, looking at you really have to analyze the data in the building management system, not just check it to see if it's working, sort of thing. Those are the big differences that we
That's great, Jared.
come across.
Thanks. So for Franz, at the Office of Sustainability, I think there'd be a lot of, and energy management, there'd be a lot of interest from different parts of North America around that structure. Steve spoke kind of quite freely this morning about the kind of relationships that you guys have been able to establish with the individual sites. I think it's something over 200 facilities that you guys are trying to keep track of. How does all that work from your perspective? And again, we talked this morning about, you know, over the 5-year period leading up to your most recent utility management plan, you're saving $5 million a year. That's not chump change. So how does that all work from your perspective?
Well, I think there's two things that kind of typify our approach. First is that we don't have a mandate from our provincial government to address climate change. So we don't have a certain target to work towards. And secondly, as I think you mentioned earlier this morning, the responsibility for the utility bills does not lie with the individual sites. So that kind of determines our approach, and where we just work with the sites based on their interest, more than coming in with guns a-blazing and targets to meet. And and I think the example of Medicine Hat here is a really great one, where we're working with Jared together, just finding the projects that have mutual interest, and that works quite well. So we do try to keep track of all facilities and their energy performance. It's not easy to do with a smaller team and many facilities, so we do tend to focus on the bigger ones. But from month to month, we do go through the numbers and try to pick off those sites where things are weird, where maybe invoicing has been off, or where there's energy use have increased because of maybe errors in operations. So we do try to focus on that. So historically, I think the $5 million that we've saved is actually, I would say, almost, you know, rowing upstream and still getting these good results. I think recently, in recent years, you know, starting in the last years of Steve's involvement, and now with Guy Momstead was taking over his position, there's been an increased interest in sustainability, which has led to increase of our operational budget as well. Initially, we were quite small, but we were lucky to get a government grant, which sort of set things in motion and allowed us to demonstrate that we could actually save money by doing these projects. And then COVID, for most people, a bad thing. I think for us as a sustainability team, was actually not that bad, because it meant that some of our sites couldn't do their bigger projects, and some of their budgets have been moved over to us. So we've been able to, because our team is smaller and nimble and our projects are smaller, we've been able to get people into the sites for brief periods of time, implement projects, and be out of there again. And so we've been able to spend some of that money, which again, then I guess demonstrated that we were able to save through these types of investments. So recently, AHS has committed a bigger budget to our office for the years to come. So future is looking good in that respect.
That is great to hear, Franz. And again, it's built on the success and I like Steve's comments this morning around, it's not just about money, it's about the relationships you built. And as you say, the willingness of everybody to work with you. And that's always struck us when we meet your guys, is they're committed to this stuff. David, we're kind of using you, if we may, as a color commentator on this. So from Chicago, from ASHRAE, from your own practice and the work that you're doing, listening into what Jared and Franz have said and the examples that Amandeep showed from Medicine Hat, what are the big thoughts that come to your mind in terms of what other hospitals elsewhere could learn from and practice and pick up on all of this?
I really enjoyed that slide with the Medicine Hat air handling unit. So I think that, that's a good example of a measure that we might be looking for when we're out, doing retro commissioning ourselves. But then maybe during pandemic, you're going to take some extra outside air compared to what the normal baseline would be. So it's great to track the data the way that you were able to show it there on the chart. Maybe it's sometimes you're taking that extra airflow, knowing that there might be some energy penalty during the time where you have that override in place.
Yep.
But that you are going to monitor that and get it put back, when the mission is to go back to the normal operation, you need to have a way to get back to the way it was before, or in this case, restore it to the recommended amount of airflow.
So again, the thoughts from Jared and Franz and ASHRAE's, so you're kind of wearing two hats here, from ASHRAE's perspective and the fact that you're working with a lot of hospitals in the Chicago area. What would you flag from your experience for, again, there are hundreds of other hospitals represented on the line today. What would you flag as, again, beyond that testing, other things that they may want to lock into for them to be successful?
Yeah, the ASHRAE has a core recommendations document that they put out, meant to apply to all facilities. There's a healthcare specific subpage on the epidemic task force area on ASHRAE's webpage. But this core recommendations document, it has a recommendation number 5, which is commissioning, and so which has been touched on by the other speakers, making sure that the equipment is delivering at least what it was supposed to originally, so that you've got the airflows and able to provide the right conditions, that filters are working as intended. You could go through all that trouble, to filter air and then have a bypass. And, so if you can look for things like that, besides the energy benefits of finding simultaneous heating and cooling, failed damper could be causing excess outside air to come in. So that could be an energy penalty. Or what if it's too little airflow during the normal operation when you're meant to be having a higher rate, to satisfy your licensing requirements. So either way, you would want to restore that. In our territory, we have a utility program that funds retro commissioning. And so we've been to a lot of the hospitals doing that. So it helps us to go through and look at least at the major equipment to make sure it's running as intended, and look for ways to reduce any excess energy use and bring it back, to the current requirements.
Okay, David, thank you. That's helpful. So pull this together, I would boldly suggest that every hospital listening to this today, and I think, you know, Jared and Amandeep, thank you, you've captured the key measures on one particular site, knowing that every hospital is different. You've all got your different leaking control valves and dampers that don't work, but you also have the relationships to build with the staff in departments, so who see that you're now scheduling their air handling, which they weren't before, and being able to manage that relationship. This, for us, ventilation systems are universally applicable. Every hospital is the right place to begin, and getting those right has a lot to say about health and safety, as well as about energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So I think you've done a great job in a compact period of time of pulling out what does this look like when you roll up your sleeves and get dirty fingernails and start working on these systems, and you get the data from the building management system, the data from the air testing contractor, the TAP contractor. What do you do with that, and how do you use that to identify measures that can make, again, the place safer and make the place more energy efficient? So as we kind of move on to the next section, you know, thank you. You know, you've all three of you have spent time with us leading up to this. Thanks for taking that time out and giving everybody a bit of insight into what has to be their first step on the path towards energy efficiency and working their way up the benchmark charts. So
I wonder if I could mention the ASHRAE meeting will actually be coming to Toronto next summer, 2022. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you there. We have our TC 9.6 that you mentioned. We'll have a committee meeting. We have an energy subcommittee, and it would be great to see a lot of people from this forum come to the meeting there.
Do you have the dates, David?
I do. I think it will be June 26th.
Awesome. So we got you guys on the 26th, and we've got IFHE on the in I think September 20th, 22nd. So we got the summer beautifully captured between leading sustainability organizations. So we're going to have a fun summer in Toronto next year.